To you in part by Prairie Outpost.
The Legislature Today show continues. Don't forget to check local listings for a nightly recap on a cable access channel near you. The Legislature Today, hosted by Dale Wetzel, managing editor of Great Plains News and the Great Plains Examiner. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, too. And now, back to the Legislature Today show.
This is the Legislature Today. This is Dale Wetzel, your host. I'm here with my co-host, Gary Emineth, and this is the University of Mary Hour on the Legislature Today. We are here with a couple of folks from the University of Mary in Bismarck, North Dakota. One of them is Dr. James Jones. He's a Vice President for Continuing and Professional Education at the university. We also have Dr. Sam Kondik, who is an Assistant Professor of Philosophy and Director of the Institute for Culture and Public Service. And I'll kind of break with tradition a little bit here, Gary. I know that radio is an audio rather than a visual medium, but Dr. Condick this is the second time he's been on our show, and each time he's shown up with an impressive set of colored pens, which have, and I'm looking at them now, they have a black pen, a gray pen, a light gray pen, brown, orange, green, various shades of green, various shades of blue, various shades of pink, various shades of orange, and yellow. And Dr. Condick, I thought that, frankly, the invention of the smartphone obviated the need for sets of colored pens, and I'd like you to kind of explain yourself here. Why do you tote those things around? I mean, we're talking about 20 pens here, aren't we?
Well, yeah, I think so. Actually, I think it is actually 20 pens. It's it's I guess maybe if I could learn how to master a smartphone, I wouldn't need it. But no, it's sort of a way for me to kind of keep track of notes and things like this. If I keep notes in the same notebook, but I have sometimes difficulty remembering where you left off with one thing and where you start with another. And this way, if you use a different pen every time you start to write, you kind of keep track of it. It also helps keep students on their toes because you use a different color for grading, and then they're like, well, why did I get graded in light green and the other guy got graded in in blue? So it keeps them guessing as to.
Is there a reason for that?
Just
is blue better than light green?
Well, if I told them that, then they start figuring out my system.
Okay.
So
there is a system, though. It isn't just some sort of random grabbing of.
I would guess a red pen with grades would not be good, and I got a red grade in my school. I remember that was not usually good.
Right.
Is that true or?
Well, I try to be a kinder, gentler sort of grader. Okay. I mean, so let them down easily. Break the news to them a little more slowly. So. No, I just enjoy writing with, it just has always helped me kind of keep track of different sorts of things. I forget there was actually some movie actor that I think I picked this up from, kept the script, used 18 different colors of highlighters to highlight the script. And I don't know,
It wasn't Robert Downey Jr., was it?
It was, well,
lookalike.
Yeah, the lookalike. Yeah, me and Rob, we hang out and we trade pens and, yeah. No, but it's just really sort of a way to help me sort of keep organized. My sister gives me a hard time about this. I'd actually bring these home and I'd be working and she would give me a hard time, and this continued for months. She would just constantly. So I went out to Amazon and I drop shipped her a set of pens to her house, and I called her about 3 days later just out of the blue and I said, "You're using them, aren't you?" And there's just this real long silence. And it's like, yeah, it's they are quite addictive, Dale. Maybe I'll send you the show. Send the show.
I'd appreciate that. Actually, in fact, the more I look at them, the more I'm tempted to have them. I mean, because my parents never gave me the 64 Crayola set when I was in elementary school, and I was always very resentful of the fact that I only got 8 Crayolas instead of 64.
Now, Dale, I don't think you can pick these up at Office Depot or Kmart or Target. These look like a little premium set to me.
No, you can pretty much get these. You can get these at a regular office supply store. Any of the office supply stores, you can go there. Maybe I should brand it. I could make the Dr. Condick marketing special here. As endorsed by. On KFYR.
You and Mary. We get Dr. Jones to join up on that.
Absolutely.
Well, he's already convinced me to go out and get a set. So.
there we are, yeah.
Well, Gary, before we get back to our subject at hand, I understand that you spoke. We have musicians here at the Peacock Alley, which you may be hearing in the background. There's a lovely young lady and a other gentleman who's playing right now an acoustic guitar, and before he was playing a hollow body electric guitar. And Gary, I understand you went down and spoke to them, and tell us about them a bit.
Well, it's a team of a young lady and a man, Bill and Tiffany. They play together often. She's the vocalist. As you said, he's the guitarist, and they're obviously got a following because this is not the normal Peacock crowd. It's a lot younger crowd tonight, and I would guess 2/3 of the crowd is young people, and they seem to be applauding a lot. So
they are applauding a lot.
So I think that's helping bring your fans with you. That's what I find. So,
Dr. Jones, we were talking about University of Mary Worldwide earlier, and the criteria for establishing a program is. To what extent do you have folks coming to you and saying, please, we could use some instruction in this particular area, and how do you respond to that?
Well, we respond to everyone, and we always have an affirmative response about that. Really and truly, there's nothing we can't do. that's the way we look at this. We have wonderful professors that develop programs for us at the University of Mary. They're primarily business programs, but when Sam told me what he was teaching, that's the reason I asked him. I thought there were some ways that we could probably utilize his skill set. But we probably have someone on a weekly basis come to us at one of our sites and talk to us about what they want us to do. One of the interesting things that I went through when I was down in Kansas City is I met with two executives from Truman Medical Center. I have 20 years of healthcare experience, so they kind of talk my language when they sit at the table. And I said to them, what do you want? What do you want us to do? And they listed about 7 things off. And I said, okay, fine, when do we start? Because they were looking at this comprehensive, full-scale program where they provide training for environmental service people, for cooks, for people that can't get a degree, but we have the ability through some of our assets to help them get through this process and make their lives better. So, I was on another program last week about this very same thing, and they said, well, how do you get this done? Because they're adults and they're afraid. I said, I went back to school when I was 35 years old. I was petrified. So it's about desiring what's in your heart, and if you want to change your life, this is the way to do it. And I got my PhD when I was 40 years old, and I flunked high school twice. I had to do it twice just to make sure to get it right. But it worked, okay?
Indeed it did.
And finally I got my degree done and my high school degree, and I went to the Navy for 6 years. So you kind of grow up and become another person once you figure out who you really are. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give opportunity to people.
What is your background in healthcare, sir?
I started working for the largest healthcare provider in the world, HCA Healthcare. And I was a data entry clerk with a PhD. I couldn't find a job. Who wants to hire somebody that's got 15 years of management experience, is over 40 years old, and all they see is money in their mind? And I went and sat down with this former priest who was my boss, and he hired me on the spot. So I did data entry for 6 months, and then I became the manager of benefits, and then the manager of human resources, and then I stayed there for 4 years and moved to another group up in Alabama, and I became the regional director. I had 7 hospitals, and then I became a district director, and I had 27 hospitals. So I stayed with the same outfit for 15 years and retired in 2005, and then went into higher education because I had this thing called a doctorate attached to my name. How do you apply that professional experience to what you're doing now? It'll sound arrogant. I don't mean for it to be, but the bottom line is I've always been successful in everything I've done. And healthcare is a very, very demanding field. It's a tough field for clinicians as well as those that are not clinicians. And I learned pretty quickly that anybody can do anything that they want to do if they want to do it bad enough. So, and I believe that everybody has a potential to be excellent, and I believe that my job is to make sure that they've got a path to do that. Dr. Kondick, what do you see when I'm intrigued by the title of the Institute for Culture and Public Service. I presume that the Institute and its participants are looking to encourage the idea of public service in the students who take courses in it. And how does one inculcate that, or is it something that comes already? I mean, are students that are interested in public service drawn to this, and you just kind of encourage that natural tendency, or is it part of your goal to bring about that enthusiasm in people that may not have it at first? Right.
No, I really do think it's a matter of trying to do as much encouraging as we can, and also development, obviously. We sort of look at public service as a very broad kind of thing. There's the obvious applications of that, which would be, public service like up on the Capitol, doing things like that, and that's certainly a component of it. But I think it also includes things like doing sort of community outreach, nonprofits. We've actually been in discussions with a couple of organizations here to try to set up an internship program specifically for nonprofits. looking at nonprofit boards in particular, so that if you got onto a board of a nonprofit, what do you do? What's the responsibility of a board member on a nonprofit? How do you conduct yourself? What sorts of expectations are there? How do you advance the mission of the organization that you've now joined? It's kind of a very specific sort of skill set that even people that have been successful in business or in academia or something like this, how do you apply yourself to this rather unique kind of thing of serving on a nonprofit board? This is one of the areas we're looking at. But I think also public service also includes the notion of it also comes into play in the for-profit world as well, right? How do I, as a manager, conduct my affairs, my business in such a way that it serves the greater good, the public good? What's the relationship between the success of my business and the success of the community as a whole, right? How do I make sure that I'm contributing in such a way that we're both successful, that we both are growing and flourishing? So the idea of public service, I think, goes into the obvious government side, but it also gets into the nonprofit and the for-profit world. Now, University of Mary, because of our Benedictine values, we're very well rooted. That's front and center in every one of the courses that we teach. So anybody that would be coming through the University of Mary for any kind of advanced degree is going to encounter these. But we also want to expand that through, as I said, through internship programs and other sorts of programs that we can involve the United Tribes with, Bismarck State College. Workshops through our community outreach programs, these kinds of things, make people aware, create a heightened awareness of the need for public service and how to conduct yourself with dignity and with honor and in such a way that you're benefiting all parties. So we do see it as sort of taking something that's already there, but then also trying to expand it and mature it, really.
Dr. Kondagai was asking Dr. Jones about his professional experience, and you mentioned that you were involved in the oil industry, and you also have a degree in philosophy, and I was wondering how that twain met.
Yeah, how did those two things happen? Well, I've got I started graduate school in 1989 and got my master's degree in 1992 and promptly ran out of money. And then I decided that eating was probably better than going to school, so I had to look for a way to survive, really. And so I started working for several companies that I was living in Houston at the time. And if you're working in Houston, the chances are you're working in some form or fashion, either directly or indirectly, with something petroleum related. And so I worked for a couple of consultancies that had lots of contracts with oil and gas industry, oil companies, oil service providers. And then the last 5 or 6 years, I worked for an oil service company that was based out of Houston. And then returned back in 2003 to finish up my PhD. So I spent 10 years kind of running around the world. It was a wonderful experience. And it's funny how I can see those experiences being applied in the classroom. I think you understand. I think Jim would agree that if you have a background in a for-profit world, you understand certain things more intuitively than maybe if you don't have that. If you're not coming out of that kind of background, you have a sense of urgency just sort of instilled in you that is often not present in the academic world. A sense for a bottom line and a P&L and those sorts of things that certainly, an academic institution doesn't exist to make money, but you still got to have money to survive, and so you have a heightened awareness of this. I got back to school in 2003 and finished up my PhD in 2009. So 89 to 2009. Used to joke with my dissertation director that meant that I qualified for the seniors tour. Having taken, I was on the 20-year plan.
All right.
But it really is. It sort of echoes what Jim was saying. Is that look, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. This was always in the back of my mind. I did use philosophy in the oil business, believe it or not. It helped me in a lot of ways to think strategically, to look downfield and see where things were going, and to help my bosses figure out where things should be going. That definitely was a big plus. I could highly recommend to anybody, and this is not just me plugging me, but I think anybody getting a philosophy background and combining it with a professional background is in some ways an ideal combination. It gives you.
I guess I'd like you to elaborate on that a bit. How does philosophical discipline apply itself to private business?
Well, the biggest thing that I think it does is that it helps you look at and see the larger picture of things, right? That if you study a profession exclusively, you get very, very good at doing a handful of things and being able to focus intently on one particular area of a business. But then as your career progresses, right, and you move higher up in that organization, you have to start having a broader and broader gaze of how your part of the business fits into all the other parts, and then how that business as a whole is fitting into an overall economy and into an overall industry and into an overall market. And then the last thing is projecting that out of time. Okay, so I got it worked out this year, but how am I setting myself up? How am I positioning myself for 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years down the line? And one of the things that you do when you study philosophy in any kind of serious way is that you're constantly you're learning to look for those kinds of connections within a philosophy text, within a thinker. You read someone and you say, okay, they're saying this now, but how is that going to play out, say, 150 pages from now? How does that? What are the implications of this idea later on? And this is really a tremendous skill. And now some people do this, almost more or less naturally, I think. I've met into people I had a boss who was a Harvard-educated MBA, and he had the same ability. He never really took a philosophy class, but he just sort of over time had developed this ability and I think just sort of innate talent to be able to look downfield and see what was going on. But many people struggle. Many people are very, very competent within a particular area. Then they get promoted to manager and then general manager, and then they're trying to figure out how do I do the whole vision thing, as it's been called before.
Well, Dr. Jones, when Dr. Connick was talking, I was thinking about your career path. You said you were a PhD, was a data entry clerk, and what was your long game when you got into that job? Did you have one at the time?
I didn't. I needed a job.
Okay.
And it's hard. It's hard to be humble when you can't do anything but do data entry. So you're going to be humble. You have no choice about this. I'm going to assume that every time you go through this process, Sam, myself, this is a wonderful learning process for both of us. We started our careers differently, but you come to a different spot in your life, and I'm 64 years old now. So my theme is to give back. I've been a senior vice president. I don't need to be that again, that kind of stuff. But if I can give back to these students, that's all I really and truly care about. So I just kind of got promoted without even asking. I don't have a good answer to this. So.
How does being around students, young people, for both of you gentlemen, how does it energize you?
Well, it keeps you on your toes.
This
for
is
sure.
True. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it makes me feel old, but yeah.
Yeah. Everybody that works for me is younger than me, and a lot younger, in their 30s. But that's wonderful. I mean, I watch these people mature and grow and develop a sense of understanding. I'm a big Strength Finders person with Gallup, so I gave Scott the book and told him to take the test so I could look at the results. And I do that with all 37 of my employees. And I talk about their strengths with them as a group and individually. So I spend a lot of time on the development of each individual person. So it's my joy. It's what I do every day. So.
I would echo that. That this is one of the marvelous things about being able to teach in this kind of environment is that you are able to really sort of play a mentoring kind of role, which is, I'm just a few years younger than Jim, but I still have a few years on my students.
Thank you.
But it's an interesting thing for me to watch for myself. Actually, is you sort of, you've gotten far enough out of school, you're far enough along in your life that you start to find that you actually do have something to give back to younger people because you see a perspective that they don't see. They've got a lot of energy, a lot of drive, but how do you focus that? How do you make that play out in a way that's going to be successful for them?
How is it advantageous to work for a private school? Or what sort of factors are at play in working for a private institution that may not be at play at a public college?
This is my third Christian university, working for a Christian university. I started teaching for a Christian university in 1988. And 85, and taught for them up until 2000. I think the one thing that it gives us that other places don't is a value structure that the secular world doesn't give to us. That's what I believe. Okay.
Yeah, I would say that's. Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. It's one, working for a Christian Catholic university does give you that value system. That's front and center in everything that we do. And it's not to say that other places don't have that, but it's much more upfront, and it's something that you can appeal to as you're working. And then working for a smaller organization, I think both Jim and I have worked for some pretty big organizations. It's a lot harder to make things happen in a big organization in a lot of ways because there's so many more layers and so many more pieces moving. And so it's refreshing to be in some place where you can get your hands around it and you're working with people that are genuinely committed to a strong set of values.
Where do you see the University of Mary being in the next 10 years?
It depends on who you ask, I suppose. From my perspective, I like to see the enrollment within worldwide double. So we're sitting at 1,000 students right now. I won't go 10, but I'll go 5. In 5 years, I'd like to see us at 2,500 students, something like that. So you never want to outgrow yourself too quickly, because then you become a number, and we're never going to become a number. We have too many special things about us, and we can't do that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I think the future is bright for us. The whole region is growing. The whole state is growing, but in particular the western half of the state is growing, so that creates tremendous opportunities for us and a need for us, really, that there's a tremendous need for higher education, and so I'm excited to be part of that. I really am.
How does the energy development in western North Dakota, how can you get clicked into the opportunities that involves in terms of offering instruction or recruiting students?
Again, through some internal connections within the state, we're going to be going out and talking to specific businesses because they've requested that we come in and develop courses not so much for the people that work for them, but for the spouses.
Right.
Because this is, for sustainability, you got to provide a global kind of educational process for people. You can't just be looking at one single part of it. So we'll be talking to a business out in Williston very soon about how we can help this particular business, which is located in Houston, go nationwide with a course process for the spouses, so we can keep the men working there. So
right, and I think also families, children, kids now that have moved to North Dakota because their families have moved there, their parents have moved here and are in high school. As they move through the high school process, going into college, we want to give them a positive alternative.
Well, we've been speaking this evening in the University of Mary Hour with the Legislature Today. We've been speaking to Dr. Sam Kondik, who is an assistant professor of philosophy and the director of the Institute for Culture and Public Service at the University of Mary, and he's a veteran of the oil industry and a gentleman with a philosophy PhD, and that's a really interesting combination. We've also been talking to Dr. James Jones, the University of Mary's Vice President for Continuing and Professional Education, and he was talking to us about the University of Mary worldwide, about the presence that the University of Mary has across this country. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. This has been the Legislature Today Radio Hour. My name is Dale Wetzel, and we will hear you and see you tomorrow night.
The Legislature Today is in part by Prairie